Well, how are you doing today? This is Adam from Georgia's Music Jacks Beach, and I've decided today to demystify the almighty mixer. This is something that a lot of us have in our arsenal in some form or another, whether you're a singer, songwriter, a band, a big old synth nerd like me who needs something to pump all them puppies through so you can play them all at the same time, even though you only have two hands. So today we decided we're just going to dissect this bit by bit, piece by piece, and try to illuminate a little bit of it so that when you are out there at your gig or your next practice session, you know how to get the most out of these babies. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over the different sections because it looks like there's a lot going on here between all the faders, knobs, lights, switches, buttons, all these things. But really, at its core, it's kind of the same couple principles just repeated over and over and over. So to start, let's start with our input section. You're going to see on this mixer, there's several different kinds of inputs. This first one, these are hybrid XLR and quarter-inch inputs. As you can see, they say mic/line on them. They don't necessarily on the surface look exactly like the XLR microphone input that you're used to, but these can do either a instrument cable or a microphone cable. The next kind of input is a pure XLR. That's the one with the three little holes on there. You line that up, you know that's for a microphone. Then this board also has what are called quarter-inch or instrument inputs as well. Also, a lot of times on mixers, they'll refer to those as line as opposed to mic inputs. Beyond that, we've also got an output section. So on this board, we have the master fader. It's called a stereo out, as you can see right there. And it lets you go either XLR cables or balanced quarter-inch instrument cables out, as well as a master or stereo section, as is depicted right there. You've also got on this kind of board a group fader. Some boards will call these subgroups, subs. And up here, if we go back up to the top, you see your group outs right there. So that controls the output from that fader, and these babies control the output from this fader. Pretty simple, right? Well, guess what? It's going to get 1/3 more complicated. Not very complicated at all. Uh, they also, on these boards, have what are called headphone outs, and some will even have what are called monitor outs. You see on these guys, they give you a knob. They don't give you a fader. That's doing the exact same thing. What's really nice about these is the headphone output is always a single balanced output. So if you have another mixer you're running into or you don't have a lot of space on a board, you can use just one cable instead of two. And then the monitor outs, much like the group outs, give you two more. That's for if you want to have some monitors on you. Let's say maybe you're mixing for a band on stage and you need to be able to reference it. You can listen to it there without affecting the overall sound of the main PA. So this is normally where people get the most freaked out. It can get the most hairy because you've just got so many different colors and controls going on. So a channel strip is any one area of this board from input to fader. And as you can see, there's a lot of the same thing over and over. So the first thing I want you to do is just take a little bit of solace. All you really got to do is learn how to work one channel strip and you can work the whole board. Now, people that know how to do these things don't always like to tell you that because they like to look like some kind of wizard, but you now are going to have what you need to let them know you too dip your toes into magic. All right, so as we noted before, it's always going to start with a pre-section now, or an input section, if you will. I want you to do something for me. When we talk about how the signal moves through this channel strip, picture a train going down a track. This is our track. And much like trains in real life, there may be points where it diverges off the track and goes somewhere else. But if as long as you kind of keep this visual, it's going to be really easy to kind of tie these thoughts together. If we're picturing this train moving down the track, just think as we move down, each little thing kind of affects the journey a little bit, but the destination is always going to remain the same. So the first part, the station, if you will, is where we're plugging in. Now, this can be quarter-inch or XLR. Today, let's talk about one of the more common styles, and that's going to be, we're going to be plugging a microphone in so someone can sing. So what they're going to do, first and foremost, you're going to plug into your mic section. Now, because we're singing, a lot of these boards have a little button on them. You'll see HPF 80 hertz. Sometimes it'll say 100 hertz. That is a high pass filter. What that means is when this button is engaged, everything from 80 hertz and down below gets cut out entirely. That's the sound of ACs going, a car passing by. Maybe you got somebody that's a real hush, breathy singer. That's going to avoid that weirdness that nobody wants to hear. Sorry, I just made you hear it. Once you get there, the next thing you're going to run into is your preamp. This is where we gain. Now, a microphone just plugged in is not going to make a lot of noise on its own, even if you're screaming into it. We need to amplify that. That's what these little white knobs are. This allows you to add gain into your signal, boost that signal up so that you can hear it. The main thing about gain to remember is this: don't make giant sweeping changes to gain. Please. You're in danger of hurting your ears, hurting your gear, and I don't ever want to have to sell somebody the same thing twice because they blew it out when we could have avoided it. Always do small incremental changes. Now, once you get the gain up to a good, comfortable level, you've also got below on this board on some of these channels a compressor. Compressors, again, you don't need to open this up all the way. This is going to be a smooth touch sort of thing. But what this is going to do is it's going to take the dynamic range, which is how loud and how quiet you might be talking, and it's going to make them seem much more in the same box. It's going to make a more even distribution of sound as a listener, and takes out some of the guesswork of the volume needs to be here, the volume needs to be down there. So again, through your pre, if you need the filter in there, you can do that. Also, this board has a really, one of my favorite things, it's called a pad. If we press this in, it's going to take away 26 decibels of audio. So if you are a metal band and you are the screamer, turn your pad on. That way you're not blowing that channel out. After our pre and our compression, something familiar to a lot of folks, there's an EQ section, these green knobs right here. And we've got a high, a mid, and a low EQ. Now, some boards will have an additional knob in between that lets you select where that EQ is acting. On this one, right next to it, it says the high, we're affecting 10 kilohertz, the mid is affecting 2.5 kilohertz, and the low is affecting 100 hertz. It's a pretty good spread. So a good way to think about it is if you're a singer, you could probably pull a little bit of that low out of there, take a little bit of the boom. It's going to make it less susceptible to feedback. Maybe you want to move your mids up slightly. You could do a little bit of additional highs for a little bit of air. After your EQ section, you get into your auxes. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can utilize these auxes. The original intention is this allows you a point on your train's journey to split. Now, your train's still going to continue down the track, but now we've got a ghost train running out somewhere else. And the reason that they give you these auxes is maybe you've got some kind of effect you want to run something through that isn't built into this system. The aux gives you a place that you can send the signal out through a piece of gear and back into the board so that you can hear how much of that effect you want through that knob. Another very typical common use, and something we're going to make another video about later, is utilizing auxes to create in-ear mixes for players on stage. Beyond your aux channels, you've got the almighty pan. This is probably the most overlooked, and anytime that you are working in a stereo spectrum, so you've got more than just one speaker, this pan can be utilized to clean up a lot of space, make a very, very nice sonic stereo image. But on the surface, it's just moving something left to right inside of the stereo field. So if I've got a guitar player on the right side of the stage and a guitar player on the left side of the stage, and I want my mix to illustrate that, left side guitar player, I might pan him out over here, kind of pointed to where he is. My right side guitar player, I'm going to do it over here. It's going to make a nice wide stereo image and make it a more engaging mix to listen to, not be as flat. Beyond that, this board utilizes mutes in an interesting way. You see these clear buttons that say on? If you want to listen to this channel and you've got signal pumping through, you've got to click on. What that does is this effectively can be utilized as a mute. So let's say somebody plugs in and all of a sudden we start getting crazy feedback, sometimes quicker than pulling a fader down, you can just turn one off. So don't be confused. There's still a little bit more we need to do after we've turned it on. So once our train's gotten all the way to this point, the second station says, oh, it's a go, baby. Now we need to set our ultimate destination. As we alluded to in our breakdown of the sections of this board, in our master section on this board, there are a couple different places that we can listen to our mix. The primary two areas are going to be your stereo fader, which is red, and your group 1 and 2 fader, which is gray. Yamaha did us a big favor when they set this board and designed it. Whenever I'm putting something through to my stereo fader, it's a red button. If I want something going to my group fader, it's a gray button. That allows us to have a main mix that maybe everybody's listening to, and then a sub mix. If we have some speakers in the back, maybe they don't need to be as loud or something like that, you send it through these things right here. Now, our train can split and multiply and become, as I kind of alluded to, ghost trains, but it's still one signal moving throughout with one ultimate destination. So that's how channel strips work. Now, we've gone over the basics of what the master section and your channel strips are, but there are on a lot of boards some interesting channel strips that maybe don't look the way you expect. On this board in particular, I'm talking about 9 and 10 and 11 and 12. These guys give us stereo inputs, quarter inch, or stereo inputs through RCA. The way to think about this is if you've got a keyboard player, normally a keyboard will have a left and a right output, because normally when we mic keyboards in a studio, you use two microphones. You create a stereo image. This allows you to have anything that has a built-in preamp, so a keyboard with a volume knob you can turn up per se, have a good stereo channel, but you only take up one fader and one channel of space out of your board. This is a great way to be able to monitor, and when this gets replayed through speakers, it will do an even split between the left and right. Another one that can be overlooked, but I have seen it come in handy in so many ways, many times over the years. The most prominent way is your RCAs. I'm an old school guy, and I listen to vinyl records at home off of a turntable. When I want to listen to my turntable, I plug my RCA into my mixer, and then I just run it off that fader. Of course, I turn it on, send it to my stereo fader, and turn that up. And now when I get to listen to records at home, I don't have to listen to the crappy little speakers built into it. Sure, they look cool, but they don't sound good. I can run it through my mixer, even process some effects on it if I want, just because sometimes you want to be weird. So those, beyond the inputs and the fact that they're stereo, still have the same kind of EQ, still have the same kind of aux. They're still going to operate, that they must be activated and given a destination that they will travel to. But beyond that, it's a good way to be able to add an instrument who takes up more than one input without taking up more than one channel. Not all mixers are going to have these, but a lot of them nowadays do, and we've hit a point where we can add some cool sweeteners into your experience without having it cost a lot of extra money. Now, most of these things operate simply, but if you don't have somebody to kind of illuminate it for you, it can be tough to figure it out. So today, that's what we're going to do. So most boards that have mixers built in have a dedicated aux send that is routed directly to the effects. Normally, those boards will have a specially colored aux fader that coincides with the color of the effects. On this Yamaha board, it's all of my aux 2, and you can even see in the corners here, it says FX. So what you do is you choose an effect through here. Now this board isn't lit up right now, but it's a simple just 1 through 24, and they tell you what each effect is. So you can set a reverb, lock it in, and then what you do is this turns up the volume of your effect. If we're not sending anything to it, we're not going to hear it. But it still needs to be turned on, because if you don't turn this on, you can start turning your auxes that feed your effects on, but you won't hear anything. This is where most people slip up. They ignore this knob right here, or they just simply don't know to do that. They'll start turning this up and going, I don't have the reverb. I don't hear the echo. I don't hear the echo. And they'll crank these auxes all the way wide open. And then what will happen is they'll go, oh, maybe this is it. And they'll turn this up and it will deafen you. So please don't start on your channels. Start at the source for your effects. I like to open mine up to about 12 o'clock. It gives me room to add more if I need to, gives me room to take away if I need to. It's a good neutral spot. After you do that, you can go through your channel strips and dial in your effects as needed. The nice thing about having a set strong signal over here is you don't need to send out a lot here, but it allows you to be very dramatic if you need to be dramatic on one. Put a good exclamation point on the sentence. The last piece of the puzzle is once it's turned up here, you have an effects return right here. You want to send your effects return still to the stereo channel, and you want it to be on. And this you will just turn up and leave at unity or at 0. If you try to mix off of this fader here and you have it maybe lower, you're going to turn all these white knobs up way more than they need to be. And it just can get cumbersome, clattery, a little bit too much going on. So much like your master fader, you're going to leave your effects return at 0. The only time you may deviate from that is if you're fading out at the end of a song and you just want that smooth. All of a sudden it's getting quiet. All right? So that's how you utilize your effects section. Feel free to get weird. This is a place for experimentation. This is a place to do something new. You can carve out new territory. And I see a lot of people that buy these boards, but they never really get to lean into this because they either don't know how or they just kind of stick to a rigid principle of we just put reverb on vocals. There's a lot of fun to be had there. And the better you get with it, the more equipped you are with your tools, the better you're going to be able to build something very cool sonically.